Hi, and welcome to this lesson on the future of food, 2030 and beyond. So in this lesson, I'm going to talk about some of the technologies that we may be using to feed the human population in 2030, maybe even sooner than that, and beyond. And the idea of this is to just really, for you to see how the applications of these technologies are going to be important in protecting the world, and also maybe for you to use this lesson as a starting point to go and research some of these technologies, and so you can kind of explain them in a bit more detail and to sort of evaluate their significance in feeding the world's population whilst preserving the environment. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing I want you to look at is this. What does this graph and map show? Have a look at it. It's playing on a loop. Let you think about it for a second. Okay, so hopefully you can see down here, we've got this number rising. This is in the billions. And over here, each little dot represents 1 million people. So this shows a kind of repeating loop of what the Earth's population has done from around about sort of 1900 to around about the year 2000. And the main takeaway features from this is that the world's population is growing, and it's growing really, really rapidly. So here's another graph showing you a similar thing. And here are the main points. It took 123 years for the population to go from 1 billion up to 2 billion. Okay, so quite a long time, but it's only going to take about 12 years for the population to go from 7 billion to 8 billion. We reached 7 billion in 2012, forecast to hit around about 8 billion in 2024. So the population is still going up incredibly, incredibly quickly. And scientists estimate that there will be close to 10 billion people in the 2050s. Now, whether the population continues growing above 10 billion or doesn't depends on a lot of factors, and many depends on whether birth rates reduce around the world like they have done in, say, for example, Europe, or whether they don't. So why is this important? Well, the fact that the world's population is increasing is important because it means that we basically are going to need more food. So can we feed 10 billion people? Will we be able to feed 10 billion people in 2050 using the same kind of technologies that we use today? Let's have a think. So first of all, if we look at our globe and we sort of start to divide it up into different parts of land, how do we use the globe? Well, this graph is taken from a report on the future of food and land usage. And actually 29% of the Earth's surface is land. The rest, 71%, is ocean. So what about of that land? How do we use it? Well, of that land, only about 71% is habitable, meaning that humans can live on it. A lot of other stuff is just not fit for human habitation. So it could be glaciers, so icy areas, or it could be barren land, including deserts and stuff like that, or rocky land that is unsuitable for human habitation. So what about that habitable land? How do we use that? Well, if we dive into that, 50% of the habitable land, 50% is used for agriculture. That's quite a large number. 50% of the land in the world that we can use to do something with, we use it for food production. 37% is forests. 11% shrub, that's kind of other wild areas, and only about 1% is urban land, built up land, which is quite a small amount, so that's land with houses on it. Well, what about that agricultural land? Do we use it all to grow the same type of crop? Of course not. What do we use it for? Well, 77% of the land that we use for agriculture, we actually use for livestock, that's meat and dairy, and 23% of it we use for crops. If we go a little bit deeper into that, we can see some more things, is that the global calorie supply, only 18% of it comes from meat and 82% comes from plant-based food. In terms of protein, the global protein supply, 37% from meat and dairy, and 63% from plant-based food. Now these last layers here might be a little bit difficult to understand based on this image, but perhaps this might help. Now this image represents what the world would look like if we kind of took all that agricultural land and bundled it together, so it wouldn't be spread out across the globe, but we could see it sort of in one place. So let's have a look at that. So livestock land, that's 20%, 27% of the Earth's surface. That's all this area over here. Forests and sort of wild land, that's this green area. The built-up area, that's sort of land with buildings on it, only about 1%. And cropland is over here. So this is the agricultural land devoted to crops like, I don't know, corn, wheat, rice, that sort of thing. So what's interesting, you may have seen in that previous slide, was that 18% of the world's calories come from all the land for animals. And in fact, 82% of the world's calories come from the land in sort of purple over here, the vegetables and grains. So clearly, it's more efficient for us to get our energy from vegetables and grains than it is from livestock. And this is important because how are we going to feed another 3 billion people in 2050? We're around about 7 billion, 7 and a bit now. How are we going to feed another 3 billion people? That's almost half again. So how are we going to produce the meat that people want, the protein that people want, without chopping down forests and destroying the environment? So these forests here, they've decreased over the last 50 years to a huge, huge extent. And we need to preserve forests to preserve basically the ecosystem and the wildlife that actually does a lot for us and we sometimes take for granted. So how are we going to do this? Well, basically this graph, we're not going to analyze it in too much detail, but basically we can't do more of the same because lamb, mutton, beef, cheese, milk, even pork, things like that, all these food sources take up a lot of land. So we're not going to be able to do more of the same because at current rates, production of meat and seafood around the world is going to double to about 1.2 trillion pounds by 2050. And if we were to try and continue to to keep that rate increasing at the same rate, we just would run out of stuff. We'd run out of fuel, pesticides, fertilizers, and land eventually that this requires. So what are we going to do? Well, now we're going to get a bit more food-centric. Look at these images, and I want you to think about, does this image look delicious or tasty? I mean, for me, it does. You can decide whether you agree or not. And that, in fact, is your standard cheeseburger. So I love cheeseburgers. This looks delicious to me. But we should be aware that with our food choices, there is an ecological impact. So a cheeseburger takes around about 5.18 kilograms of CO2 to produce. So that's all the sort of different factors that go into it, the beef and the cheese. So it has a kind of carbon footprint of 5.18 kilograms of CO2. That's quite high. Let's consider some other food options. What about this? Does that look tasty? Have a think. Well, to me, yes, it does look pretty tasty. I've eaten one of these. It is pretty tasty. This is an Impossible Burger. So this looks like meat, tastes like meat. It's pretty convincing. You can find a review on YouTube and have a check for yourself. But it only produces 0.56 kilograms of CO2. So that's 11% of a regular burger. A lot less. So how is this done? Well, it's plant-based. So the way it's done is, first of all, the protein in the burger is extracted from things like soy and potato. So it is high in protein, just as high as protein as normal beef, pretty much. And it's got some fats in it that come from coconut, which give it that kind of, well, I don't know, makes it delicious in at least some respect. And then the key interesting bit of technology behind this is that it actually has heme. So this heme comes from the roots of certain plants, like pea plants. And heme, you might be aware, is the chemical that is found in hemoglobin, i.e. blood. So this is they've made this kind of plant blood that makes the burger taste like meat. And it is really convincing. I've had it. So that's one technology, sort of artificial meats that are made from plants that we might be consuming in the future. What about this one? Does that look good? Does to me. I've had this one. I think you can get this in the UK. I believe that Beyond Meat is, you can get it in Burger King in the UK. This produces about 0.52 kilograms of CO2, so 10% of a regular burger. Now, it's a similar technology, so I won't go through it in so much detail, but basically, But basically, we get protein from peas. We get the color and the sort of red color in the center of the meat from beetroot. And again, we use coconut oil. But this is another vegetarian alternative to a burger. All right, let's have a look at another one. You've seen this one already because I accidentally pressed forward. But this, does that look tasty to you? What do you think? Well, those are just chicken nuggets. Those are normal chicken nuggets. Perhaps I could have found a better picture, but normal chicken nuggets, this figure here, 1.1 kilograms of CO2 is for, I think it's 10 chicken nuggets from McDonald's, okay? So 10 chicken nugget portion from McDonald's contributes about 1.1 kilograms of CO2 released into the atmosphere. Now that's a lot less than beef. I think it's, beef was 5.8 kilograms, I think. So that is a lot less than beef. So chicken is a more ecologically sustainable alternative to beef, which is a good thing. Now, one of the reasons we can get that carbon outputs down so low is the fact that we rear chickens really, really intensively. So a lot of the chickens that we, battery chickens that we farm for meat, sort of that you might get in a McDonald's chicken nugget, kind of live in cages a bit like this. These are actually egg-laying hens, but the idea is similar. Many, many chickens in a confined space, and they're selectively bred to get fat really quickly. I think it only takes about 35 days or something from when they're hatched to when they're killed for meat. And that's a very efficient process. But there are ethical considerations around the chickens being kept like that. So maybe that's something that you're comfortable with. That's absolutely fine. Or maybe it's not. So are there any alternatives? Well, what about this? Does this look tasty? Do you know what it is? Well, that's a chicken nugget. But this chicken nugget has the same CO2 output as the previous chicken nuggets, but no birds were harmed during the making of these nuggets. No birds were harmed or killed during the making of these chicken nuggets. So how is that even possible? Well, these chicken nuggets were produced by a sort of quite a high-tech company. And what they did was they took a chicken, they plucked a feather from the chicken, and at the base of this feather, where it was plucked out of the chicken, there are some cells, okay? Little cells just hanging onto that feather. They took these cells and they put them into a special kind of dish, basically like a special Petri dish, and with special treatments, they allowed the cells to divide and grow. And they basically turned them into stem cells. So the stem cells grew and grew and grew and produced meat, produced muscle cells. Now, this company has produced chicken. It's called Just Meat, I think, or Just is the company. They've done chicken. I believe it's sort of just about to come onto the market, maybe next year. And I think they're working on beef as well. And I think they're also working on, I think, prawn and beef. I definitely know there's another company working on kind of lab-grown prawn as well. So this is another new technology, growing meat, real animal tissue in the lab. So it's called sort of slaughter-free meat. Okay, another technology. Let's have a look. What do you think about these? Just a sort of energy bar. But this is an energy bar with a difference. This energy bar is made of insects. Insects are actually a really, really sustainable source of protein for a couple of reasons. You can get the same protein as you would from, let's say, chicken, but for only 25% of the CO2 compared to chicken. And in fact, only a half of the amount of water that you need. So insect protein may become something that we eat more and more, potentially in a powdered form or put into energy bars and that sort of thing, where we're not too concerned about the source of the protein. It's more just the protein and the calories. So that might be something that we start to eat more of. You can get these now. If you sound interesting, order them online, see what they taste like. One more technology, okay? And this one is really, really cutting edge. Does this look tasty? Pancakes. I think so. Yes, pancakes are delicious. Now, there's a really, really revolutionary type of pancake that is just starting to be available, not for mass market, but it's just on the kind of testing stage. And it is made, well, the thing that's special about these pancakes is the flour is not from wheat. The flour comes from the air. Now, how do you get flour from the air? Well, basically, this company called Solein Foods takes water, H2O. Sorry, I should have put a small 2 there. science error, that should be a small 2, H2O, and it splits the water into oxygen and hydrogen. It does that using electricity. And the idea is that if we can do this using solar power electricity, then there will be no carbon cost to this at all. So now we have oxygen and we have hydrogen gas. Now that hydrogen gas can be fed to certain genetically engineered bacteria, and they will produce carbohydrates and proteins. They basically, the bacteria feed off the hydrogen and grow and turn into flour. So this flour is called solein flour, and it can be used to cook pancakes, or potentially it could be used maybe to feed animals if we still want to rear animals, which reduces the amount of land we need for them. Or it can be used, this solein flour, to help grow that lab cultured meat as the energy source for that lab grown slaughter-free meat. So this is a graph I've taken from their website showing the sort of greenhouse gas emissions of various different animal products. And there's a big range there depending on how the animals are grown, but solein down here is on the lower end. Not as low as just like lentils, pulses, but still very low. And potentially if we use solar power, it would be even lower if it was 100% renewable energy that went into this. Okay, so those are some technologies that may be more important for us going forwards. Now, I wanted to end with this. I am a omnivore. I eat meat, I eat vegetables, and I've tried to reduce my meat, my sort of weekly meat intake, but you don't have to. Any reduction at all is good for the environment, okay? So potentially you don't want to give up the things that you love. Potentially you could swap out one burger a week for a vegetarian burger, see how that tastes. And you could start thinking about using some of these, experimenting with some of these products that are already out there. And in the future, these products, the idea is that these products are going to become cheaper and cheaper. So they're cheaper than normal meat. And that's really going to help us feed 10 billion people by 2050 without destroying the environment. Okay? So if you're interested in any of those technologies, go research them, go find out more about how they're done, the nuts and bolts of the processes, and you can sort of evaluate them and see how much you really think they're help us out. Okay? I hope you've enjoyed that. That was the future of food and some of the new technologies that might be coming to a supermarket near you. Bye-bye.